If you want to survive tonight, don't open that door. Emily Carter froze with her hand inches from the apartment door. The message had arrived 3 minutes ago from an unknown number, and she had read it so many times that the words no longer looked real. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of her small second-floor apartment in Boston, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of gold. Emily glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. She had never believed in mysterious warnings. She believed in rent payments, overdue bills, long shifts, and keeping her life as simple as possible. But lately, simple had become impossible. For 2 weeks, someone had been following her. Not close enough to prove anything. Never long enough to catch. Just a dark sedan appearing outside her workplace. A stranger standing across the street from her grocery store. Footsteps that seemed to disappear whenever she turned around. She had finally reached her limit that afternoon. That was why she had hired a bodyguard. The agency had sent 3 candidates. Emily rejected the first 2. One talked too much. The other treated her like a helpless child. Then there was Ethan Blackwood. He had arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a simple black coat, dark trousers, and an expression so calm it almost made Emily nervous. He looked younger than she expected, perhaps 35, with pale skin, dark hair, and unusually steady gray eyes. There was nothing flashy about him. No expensive watch. No intimidating muscles. No dramatic claims about his experience. When Emily asked why she should trust him, he simply said, "You don't have to trust me. Just let me do my job." That answer had convinced her. Now, standing alone in her apartment, Emily wished she had asked more questions. Her phone vibrated again. Another message. This time, only 4 words. "He knows where you live." Emily's breath caught. She slowly stepped away from the door. Then came 3 soft knocks. Not loud. Not hurried. 3 perfectly measured knocks. Emily stared at the door. "Emily!" Ethan's voice came from the hallway. She rushed toward it, then stopped. How had he gotten upstairs without her hearing him? The building's elevator. Always groaned. The stairs creaked. Yet there had been no sound. "It's me," he said calmly. Emily looked through the peephole. Ethan stood beneath the hallway light, completely dry despite the rain outside. His face was calm, almost unnaturally calm. "How did you get here so fast?" she asked through the door. Ethan's expression changed for the briefest moment. "You should let me in." Emily hesitated. Then he added quietly, "Because whoever sent those messages is not the person you should be worried about." Her fingers tightened around the doorknob. For the first time, Emily wondered if hiring Ethan Blackwood had protected her from danger or brought something far more mysterious into her life. Emily did not open the door. Instead, she took one slow step backward and kept her eyes on Ethan through the peephole. "What do you mean, I should be worried about you?" she asked. For several seconds, there was only the soft hum of the hallway lights. Then Ethan answered, "I mean that the people watching you are not looking for your money." His voice remained calm, but something in it had changed. It was no longer the voice of a hired bodyguard reassuring a nervous client. It sounded like someone who already knew exactly what was happening. Emily unlocked the door, but kept the chain in place. "Then what are they looking for?" Ethan looked directly through the narrow opening. "You." The word landed heavily. Emily stared at him. "Why?" "I do not know yet." "That is not very reassuring." A faint smile touched his face. It was not meant to be. She almost laughed, but the sound never came. Ethan looked past her shoulder toward the apartment window. His expression suddenly became focused. "Turn off the lights." Emily frowned. "Why?" "Please." There was something about the way he said it that made her obey. She switched off the lamps. The apartment fell into darkness, leaving only the muted glow of Boston outside. Ethan entered after she removed the chain and quietly closed the door behind him. He did not rush. He did not search drawers or check closets like the bodyguards Emily had seen in movies. He simply stood still and listened. Emily watched him. "What are you doing?" "Listening." "To what?" Ethan turned his head slightly toward the window. "The building." Emily almost rolled her eyes. "That does not make sense. Most things do not until you know what to listen for." He walked to the window and stopped several feet away from it. "How long has that car been outside?" Emily moved closer but stayed behind him. Through the glass, she could see the same dark sedan parked across the street. "I think it has been there since this afternoon." Ethan nodded once. "It was there when you left work." Emily looked at him sharply. "How would you know that?" Ethan did not answer. Instead, He checked the lock on the apartment door, then the windows, moving with quiet precision. Every motion was deliberate. Every detail seemed to matter. Emily noticed something strange. He never looked at his phone. He did not need instructions. He seemed to know the apartment better than she did, even though he had never been inside before tonight. "Ethan," she said softly. He stopped. "Who are you?" For the first time, his expression became unreadable. "Someone who knows what it feels like to be hunted." Emily studied his pale face beneath the faint city light. There was something ancient in his eyes, something that did not belong to an ordinary man in Boston. Before she could ask another question, Ethan suddenly looked toward the ceiling. "We need to leave." Emily's heart skipped. "Why?" He looked back at her. "Because they just found us." And somewhere above them, 3 slow footsteps crossed the ceiling of the apartment. The 3 footsteps stopped. Emily stood perfectly still, barely breathing as she stared at the ceiling. Ethan did not move. His eyes remained fixed upward, listening to something Emily could not hear. "What do we do?" she whispered. "We leave through the back stairwell," he said. "Now." Emily grabbed her coat and purse. "That stairwell leads to the alley." "I know. And if someone is waiting there?" Ethan looked at her calmly. "Then stay close to me." They moved through the apartment without turning on a single light. Emily followed Ethan into the narrow hallway, suddenly aware of every sound around them. The old building creaked. Pipes hummed behind the walls. Rain tapped against the windows. Yet Ethan seemed to hear something beyond all of it. He stopped beside the stairwell door. "Wait." Emily almost walked into him. "What?" He raised one hand. A second later, a faint metallic click came from somewhere below. Ethan opened the door only an inch and looked down the staircase. Clear. Emily followed him down. They reached the first floor without seeing anyone. The lobby was empty. The front desk clerk had already gone home, leaving only a small lamp glowing beside the entrance. Emily glanced through the glass doors. The dark sedan was still across the street. "That car is still there," she whispered. Ethan looked at it for less than a second. "It is a distraction." "Then what are we supposed to be watching?" Ethan turned toward the side exit. "The people who do not need cars." Emily followed his gaze. 2 figures stood beneath an awning across the alley, completely still despite the rain. She could not see their faces clearly. Ethan stepped slightly in front of her. "Do not worry," he said. "They will not come near you." His confidence should have frightened her, but somehow it did the opposite. They slipped into a small 24-hour cafe 2 blocks away, where warm lights reflected across the rain-covered windows. Emily sat at a corner table while Ethan remained standing. "Coffee?" she asked. "No, thank you." "You do not drink coffee?" "Not often." Emily stared at him. "You are a strange bodyguard." "I have been told that." Despite everything, she smiled. It was the first normal moment of the night. Then Ethan's expression changed. He looked toward the front window. A young man had entered the cafe and was speaking quietly with the cashier. Nothing seemed unusual, but Ethan immediately recognized something Emily did not. A small silver emblem was pinned beneath the man's coat. Ethan's face became colder. Emily noticed. "What is it?" He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something almost protective in his eyes. "Someone from my past." "An old friend." "No," he paused. "An old enemy." Emily's smile disappeared. "Who are you really?" Ethan remained silent. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Then the cafe lights flickered once. Twice. Ethan slowly looked down at his own hand. Beneath the skin of his wrist, a faint ancient symbol had begun to glow. He quickly covered it with his sleeve before Emily could see. But she had already noticed. Emily kept her eyes on Ethan's sleeve. "What was that?" she asked. Ethan slowly lowered his hand. "What was what?" "Your wrist." He held her gaze for a moment, then calmly pulled his sleeve farther down. "Nothing." Emily gave him a skeptical look. "I have known you for less than a day, and somehow you have already become the least convincing person I have ever met." A faint smile appeared on Ethan's face. "That may be true." Before Emily could continue, the cafe lights flickered again. The young man, near the counter, looked toward them. Ethan noticed immediately. "We are leaving." Emily glanced at the rain outside. "Again?" "Yes." "You keep saying that without explaining anything." Ethan stepped closer to the table, his voice quiet. "Because explanations take time, and right now time is the one thing we do not have." Emily stood and picked up her purse. "Then tell me something I can understand." Ethan looked directly at her. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated. The question seemed simple, yet somehow it felt more important than anything else that had happened that night. I do not know, she admitted. Ethan nodded. That is enough. They left through the back entrance and entered a narrow side street filled with rain and yellow streetlights. Emily walked beside him, trying to understand the man she had hired. He never seemed nervous. He never checked behind them. He simply moved forward as if the entire city were a map he had memorized centuries ago. Ethan, Emily said, how long have you been a bodyguard? He paused. A long time. How long is a long time? Long enough to learn that people rarely notice what is standing directly in front of them. Emily looked at him. That sounds like something an old man would say. Ethan smiled faintly. I have been called worse. They reached the corner, where a traffic signal painted the wet pavement green. Emily suddenly noticed something strange. Ethan had stopped beneath the rain, yet not a single drop seemed to remain on his dark coat. She stared. You are not getting wet. Ethan looked down at himself. For one brief second, his expression revealed surprise. Then he said, the rain is light. Emily looked around. Rain was pouring hard enough to blur the buildings across the street. That is not light rain. Ethan did not answer. They continued walking. A few minutes later, they reached an old hotel with a glowing red sign above the entrance. Ethan led her inside and asked the receptionist for a room under his name. Emily stared at him. You planned this. I planned several possibilities. You knew this would happen? I suspected. He handed the receptionist a credit card, then turned toward Emily. You will stay here tonight. And you? I will stay nearby. Emily folded her arms. You are not going to sleep, are you? Ethan became completely still. For the first time, his calm expression disappeared. Emily noticed the silence. Then she whispered, You really do not sleep. Ethan looked toward the dark window behind her. Not anymore. Emily's curiosity deepened, but before she could ask why, the hotel doors opened. A tall woman in a dark coat entered, looked directly at Ethan, and stopped. Her face turned pale with recognition. Your Majesty, she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes for one brief moment. Emily heard the words clearly. Your Majesty? She looked at Ethan. He said nothing. The woman immediately lowered her head. Emily's heart began to race. The ordinary bodyguard she had hired was suddenly looking less ordinary by the second. Emily stared at the woman standing in the hotel lobby, unable to understand what she had just heard. Your Majesty, she repeated softly. The woman seemed to realize her mistake and immediately looked at Ethan. He gave her a calm, unmistakable warning with his eyes. Please, Ethan said, not here. The woman nodded and stepped toward them. I apologize, sir. Emily looked from one to the other. Sir. The woman lowered her voice. There are people looking for you. Ethan's expression remained composed. I am aware. The council has been informed that you are. In Boston, Emily felt a strange chill pass through her. Council. Ethan looked at her. Emily, go upstairs. She did not move. No, his eyebrows lifted slightly. No. You hired me to protect you, she said, almost repeating his own words from earlier. You said I should stay close to you. So I am staying close. For a moment, Ethan simply watched her. Then something softened in his expression. You are more stubborn than I expected. I have been told that too. The woman glanced between them, clearly surprised by Emily's confidence. Ethan turned toward the elevator. Come with me. They entered together, and the doors closed. Emily immediately pressed the button for the 10th floor. You are going to explain. Ethan leaned against the wall. What would you like to know? Who was that woman? Someone who knows me. Why did she call you Your Majesty? Ethan was silent. Emily folded her arms. And do not tell me it was a joke. It was not a joke. The elevator continued upward. Emily watched the numbers change. 7, 8, 9. Then what are you? Ethan looked at her reflection in the polished elevator doors. Someone who has spent a very long time hiding. The doors opened. They stepped into a quiet hallway. Ethan walked toward their room, but Emily stopped him. You keep saying you are protecting me, but you have not told me why I am in danger. Ethan turned. Because someone believes you are connected to me. But I have never met you before yesterday. I know. Then why would anyone care about me? Ethan's eyes became distant. Because sometimes a person can become important before they understand why. Emily stared at him. His words sounded strange, almost like a warning. Then she noticed something else. A faint reflection appeared in the hallway mirror behind him. His face looked unusually pale beneath the soft hotel lights. much paler than hers. His eyes were closed, but for an instant, she thought she saw a subtle red glow beneath his eyelids. Emily blinked. It was gone. "Ethan," she whispered. He looked at her. "Yes." "What are you?" He did not answer. Instead, he reached for the room key. The moment his fingers touched it, the lights in. The hallway flickered. Ethan suddenly looked toward the far end of the corridor. His expression changed completely. "Stay here." Emily followed his gaze. No one was there. "Who is it?" she asked. Ethan's voice became quieter. "Someone who should have remained far away from me." Emily looked at his hand. Beneath his sleeve, that same ancient symbol briefly glowed again. This time, she saw it clearly. Ethan noticed her staring. He slowly lowered his arm. Then he whispered, "Emily, there is something I need to tell you." "Emily, before I tell you anything, you need to promise me one thing." Ethan's voice was quiet, but the seriousness in it made her stop breathing for a moment. "What?" "You will not be afraid of me." Emily stared at him. "That depends on what you are about to tell me." For several seconds, Ethan said nothing. The hotel hallway remained silent, the distant sound of rain barely audible beyond the windows. Then he looked down at his wrist and slowly pulled back his sleeve. The ancient symbol was visible beneath his pale skin, glowing with a faint silver light. Emily stepped closer. "What is that?" "A mark older than this city," he said. "Older than the country." She looked into his eyes. "And what does it mean?" Ethan took a slow breath. "It identifies my family." "Your family?" "A family that has ruled a hidden world for centuries." Emily's expression changed. "You are not talking about politicians, are you?" A faint smile appeared on his face. "No," he turned toward the window. "There are people who live among humans without being human. They have their own laws, their own traditions, and their own leaders." Emily felt a strange chill. "Vampires." Ethan did not deny it. The words seemed to hang in the quiet hallway. Emily looked at him again, searching his face for any sign that he was joking. There was none. "You are a vampire." "Yes." "And the woman downstairs called you your majesty." Ethan nodded. "Because I am their king." Emily took a slow step backward. "The vampire king? That is what they call me." The truth should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. Perhaps because Ethan had spent the entire night protecting her without ever asking for anything in return. "Why hide it?" she asked. Ethan's eyes moved toward the rain-covered window. "Because power attracts people who want to use it. I chose a quieter life. You became a bodyguard." "For a while." Emily almost smiled. "That is a very strange retirement plan." Ethan gave a quiet laugh. Then the warmth disappeared from his expression. "But there is something you do not understand." "What?" "The people watching you are not interested in me anymore." Emily's face became serious. "Then who are they interested in?" Ethan looked directly at her. "You." She shook her head. "That does not make sense." "It will." He reached into his coat and removed a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph. Emily stared at it. The picture showed a woman standing beside a stone building many decades ago. The woman looked remarkably like Emily. Same pale skin. Same dark eyes. Same small mark beneath her left eye. Emily's fingers trembled as she held the photograph. "Who is she?" Ethan answered softly. "Her name was Eleanor Carter." Emily looked up. "That is my grandmother's name." Ethan's expression became solemn. "I know." The hallway seemed to grow colder. Emily looked back at the photograph. "How do you know my grandmother?" Ethan remained silent for several seconds. Then he said, "Because I promised her something 70 years ago." Emily stared at him. "What promise?" Ethan's eyes met hers. "That if her family was ever in danger, I would protect them." Emily slowly lowered the photograph. "So you did not become my bodyguard by accident?" Ethan shook his head. "No." And for the first time that night, Emily realized that her hiring him had never been the beginning of their story. It had only been the moment their old promise finally came due. Emily stared at the photograph, her thoughts moving faster than she could organize them. "If you knew my grandmother, why did you wait until now?" Ethan's expression remained calm, but his eyes carried something older than the hotel around them. "Because Eleanor asked me to stay away unless your family was truly in danger. And now you believe we are?" "I know you are." Emily looked at the photograph again. The woman standing beside the stone building was unmistakably her grandmother, but she looked younger, confident, almost fearless. "What happened 70 years ago?" Ethan was silent for a moment. "Your grandmother discovered something that the Vampire Council wanted hidden." Emily looked up. "What?" A secret about my family. Before she could ask another question, the elevator at the end of the hallway opened. The woman from the lobby stepped out. She was no longer alone. Two other figures stood behind her, both dressed formally, both carrying the quiet authority of people accustomed to being obeyed. Ethan immediately stepped between them and Emily. The woman lowered her head. "Your Majesty, the council requests your presence." Ethan's voice remained even. "The council can wait." "They will not." One of the newcomers spoke for the first time. "The human must come with us." Emily felt Ethan's posture change. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a threatening gesture. He simply said, "No." The single word seemed to make the entire hallway fall silent. Emily looked at him. "Why do they want me?" Ethan glanced at her. "Because they believe your family carries something that belongs to my bloodline." "I do not understand." "Neither did your grandmother at first." The older woman stepped forward. Eleanor knew the truth. She chose to protect it. Emily's voice softened. "What truth?" The woman looked at Ethan. "Tell her." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the faint silver glow had returned beneath his skin. "There is an ancient covenant between my family and yours," he said. "Your grandmother was its final guardian." Emily's heart raced. Guardian of what? Ethan looked at the photograph in her hand. "A promise that prevents the vampire houses from turning against one another." The words sounded impossible, yet somehow the strange events of the night were beginning to fit together. The messages, the watchers, the woman who recognized Ethan, the photograph, all of it led back to Eleanor Carter. Why would anyone want that promise broken? Emily asked. Ethan's voice became quieter. Because whoever controls the covenant could challenge the throne. The hotel lights flickered again. This time, every light in the hallway went dark. Emily instinctively reached for Ethan's hand. He looked down at their joined hands, surprised for the briefest moment. Then his expression softened. "Stay beside me." A faint sound came from the lobby below. The council members exchanged worried glances. Ethan looked toward the elevator. "They are here." Emily swallowed. "Who?" Ethan's eyes changed, becoming a deep crimson for only a second before returning to gray. "The ones who have been waiting 70 years for your family to return." The hotel remained silent for several seconds, as though the entire building were holding its breath. Emily tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. "What happens now?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her, and for once, there was no distance in his expression. "Now you stay beside me, and you remember that you are not alone." The elevator doors opened again, but no one stepped out. Instead, a soft voice came through the empty hallway. "Ethan Blackwood." The voice was calm, almost respectful. "The council has waited long enough." Ethan looked toward the elevator. "You should not have come here. Neither should you have returned." Emily glanced at the woman from the council. The woman looked uneasy. "Your Majesty, please. We can resolve this without conflict." Ethan nodded. "Then tell them to leave." The woman hesitated. "They will not." Emily looked at Ethan. "Why are you still protecting me?" He turned toward her. "Because I made a promise. To my grandmother. And now to you." His words were simple, but they carried a weight Emily could feel. She looked down at their joined hands. For the first time since the night began, she was no longer thinking about the strange messages or the people watching her. She was thinking about the man standing beside her. The man who had entered her life as a bodyguard and turned out to be something far older. Ethan gently released her hand. "I need you to do something." "What?" "Take the photograph and go to room 1008. Emily frowned. "Why?" "There is a locked drawer beneath the desk." "What is inside?" "The reason your grandmother trusted me." Emily hesitated. "And what about you?" Ethan looked toward the elevator. "I will make sure nobody follows you." She shook her head. "You said we stay together." Ethan gave her a faint smile. "You remembered." Emily moved toward the room, then stopped. "Ethan." He turned. "Please come back." Something changed in his eyes. For a man who had lived for centuries, the request seemed to reach somewhere no threat ever could. "I will." Emily entered room 1008 and found the desk exactly where he had described it. Beneath the lower drawer, her fingers found a small metal latch. She pressed it. A hidden compartment opened. Inside was a worn leather journal, a silver key, and a folded letter bearing her grandmother's handwriting. Emily opened the letter with trembling fingers. "Emily, if you are reading this, then Ethan has finally returned." She stopped. Her grandmother knew this day would come. The letter continued. explaining that the covenant was not simply an agreement between two families. It was a promise made to protect both humans and vampires from a war that had nearly destroyed everything decades ago. But one final sentence made Emily's heart stop. The covenant can only be renewed by a living Carter and the Vampire King. Emily slowly lowered the letter. Outside the room, a distant sound echoed through the hotel. Then Ethan's voice came through the door. "Emily, open the door." She rushed toward it. But something felt wrong. Ethan had promised to return. Yet the voice outside was not his voice. It was almost perfect. Almost. Emily stepped back and looked at the silver key in her hand. Then the door handle began to turn. Emily stepped away from the door. "That is not Ethan." The handle stopped turning. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the voice outside spoke again. "Emily, open the door. We need to leave." It sounded exactly like Ethan, but something was missing. The warmth. The quiet patience she had heard all night. Emily looked at the silver key in her hand and remembered her grandmother's letter. The covenant could only be renewed by a living Carter and the Vampire King. She walked toward the desk instead of the door and inserted the key into a small lock hidden beneath the journal. A soft click followed. The leather cover opened by itself, revealing a second letter and a faded drawing of a young woman standing beside a man with unmistakably pale skin and dark eyes. Emily recognized her grandmother immediately. The man beside her was Ethan. He looked exactly the same as he did now. Emily's breath caught. 70 years had passed, yet Ethan had not changed at all. The second letter contained only a few lines. "Emily, Ethan will tell you that the covenant protects both worlds. That is true, but there is one part he may never reveal. The covenant does not merely protect the human family. It protects the king from becoming what his enemies fear." Emily stared at the words. Outside, the false voice spoke again. "Emily, please open the door." She did not answer. Instead, she whispered, "Ethan." A quiet knock came from the door. Then another. Emily held the silver key tightly. "If you are really Ethan, tell me something only he would know." Silence. Several seconds passed. Then a familiar voice came from the hallway. "Your grandmother hated thunder." Emily's eyes widened. It was true. Eleanor had always covered the windows during storms because she disliked the sound. But then the voice continued. "She also told me never to trust a Carter." Emily froze. Ethan had never said that. Her grandmother had trusted him completely. Suddenly, another voice came from the stairwell. "Emily." This one was unmistakable. "Ethan. Calm. Real. Do not open the door." Emily closed her eyes in relief. "Where are you?" "2 floors below. I thought you were outside." "I was delayed." His voice grew quieter. "Listen carefully. The person outside knows your memories because they have been searching through your family's history. Do not let them inside." Emily looked at the door. "What should I do?" "Take the journal and wait." "For how long?" "Until I reach you." Emily nodded, even though he could not see her. Then the false voice returned. "Emily, he is lying to you." She remained silent. "He has hidden the truth from you for 70 years. Emily looked at the photograph on the desk. Ethan had been there when her grandmother was young. He had protected her family for decades. Yet there was still one question Emily could not ignore. What had Ethan been protecting them from? The hotel lights suddenly returned. The hallway became quiet. Emily opened the door only a few inches. No one stood outside. Then Ethan appeared at the far end of the hallway, walking toward her. His coat was still dry. His expression was calm. But this time Emily noticed something different. His eyes were no longer gray. They were deep crimson. He stopped several feet away and looked at her. "Emily," he said softly, "now you know enough." She held up the journal. "Not everything." Ethan nodded. "No, not everything." He looked toward the dark window. Beyond the glass, the rain had stopped. The city was silent. Then Ethan extended his hand. "The choice is yours now." Emily looked at the silver key, then at the Vampire King who had hidden behind the identity of an ordinary bodyguard. She placed the key in his palm. "Then I choose to hear the whole truth." For the first time in centuries, Ethan smiled without hiding anything. And somewhere beyond the city lights, an ancient symbol awakened, signaling that the covenant had begun again.